Most men move through life believing that respect is born from good intentions, from pleasing others, from being accepted. They don't realize that this quiet chase for approval turns them into faint figures, easy to replace and even easier to ignore. Every gesture made to be liked only reinforces their own irrelevance, creating a cycle in which the more they try to be valued, the less value they actually hold. What they call morality, the world sees as disguised submission. There are invisible laws that govern the social game, laws most people never notice because they grow up believing that goodness alone will protect them. But there is a darker, older, and unforgiving rule that separates the men who lead from the men who merely follow. Those who fail to understand it remain trapped in a terrain that was never theirs to command. Today, you will see the law that elevates a man above 90% of the others. The ordinary man believes he acts by his own will, yet he is almost always driven by inherited impulses, deep fears, and unresolved desires. He operates inside a psychological theater he doesn't notice, reacting to external stimuli like an animal that mistakes habit for choice. This illusion of autonomy creates an invisible cycle of submission, where every gesture reveals more fragility than intention. In the end, he does not govern his life. He only repeats patterns that keep him small. His need for validation is his primary prison. The average man adjusts his posture, his words, and even his values to avoid rejection. He fears silence, fears a disapproving look, fears losing space in environments that never considered him relevant to begin with. This fear turns him into moldable material, easily manipulated by those who understand the psychology of power. What he mistakes for virtue in his search for acceptance is actually the exposure of his dependence. Attachment to comfort completes his confinement. A man who avoids discomfort does not grow, he merely hides. He trades discipline for distraction, presence for anxiety, and inner strength for immediate pleasures that numb his sense of impotence. This constant escape prevents any real development because power demands friction, confrontation, and awareness. Without these, he remains emotionally fragile, always at the mercy of circumstances. The truth is simple. A man who does not govern himself governs nothing. Most men ignore this law because they have never learned to observe their own reactions. They respond to the world without realizing that each response hands control to someone else. Their entire life becomes a field where others define their value, their limits, and their destiny. And because they do not understand their own interior, they will never command any external environment. The price of weakness is not pain, it is irrelevance. And the ordinary man pays this price every day without realizing that the currency is his own identity. When kindness is adopted as a shield, it turns a man into someone easily anticipated. He begins living according to the need to appear virtuous, sacrificing his own strength to fit expectations that were never meant to protect him. This pursuit of being correct doesn't come from ethics but from fear. Fear of rejection, misinterpretation, or being labeled a threat. Naive morality becomes, therefore, a disguised form of emotional submission. Societies cultivate this mold from early on. Men are trained to yield, to explain themselves, to justify every impulse, to become transparent so they never disrupt the established order. They are taught that being gentle is respectable, when in reality it simply makes them controllable. Social groups, families, and relationships demand this docility because it simplifies the game. A predictable man is always a man who can be manipulated. Absolute kindness becomes a silent invitation to domination. Moral naivete also distorts how risk is perceived. The overly good man believes that intentions alone will protect him, forgetting that the world responds to behavior, not internal virtues. He assumes his honesty will be recognized, his loyalty valued, his empathy returned. But the truth is different. These traits, when not paired with strategy, become ammunition against him. Anyone who operates without calculation hands over his own ground to the first opponent who notices his transparency. Machiavellian effectiveness appears as the counterpoint. It isn't about being cruel, but about understanding that kindness is a tool, not an identity. A strategist offers virtue when it strengthens his position and withholds it when it exposes him. He knows the world doesn't respect intention, it respects impact. And to generate impact, he must control his image precisely, avoiding the mistake of giving away his emotional center in exchange for momentary approval. The illusion of kindness protects no one. It merely allows others to define the value and reach of the man who carries it. Power doesn't come from being good or bad, but from being unreadable, and the man who depends on morality to exist has already surrendered his own domain. Social structure is not defined by brute force or visible merit, but by something more subtle, the control of perception. The one who defines how he is seen determines the limits of how others behave. Whoever controls the psychological terrain doesn't need to raise his voice or show aggression. The way he positions himself is enough to shape how others interpret him. It's this interpretation, not objective reality, that builds silent hierarchies. Power is born in someone else's gaze before it appears in action. The law is simple and unforgiving. The man who controls perception controls the terrain, and the one who controls the terrain controls men. This rule works because human beings react to what they believe they see, not to what actually exists. The image a man projects, calculated, cold, distant, creates invisible boundaries that protect him and simultaneously restrict the behavior around him. People adjust themselves instinctively in front of someone who appears unshakable, even if they don't understand his true strength. Strategic illusion is what constructs authority. In practice, controlling perception means taking control of the narrative before it forms. The average man tries to be understood. The strategist defines the context in which he will be interpreted. He doesn't explain himself, doesn't rush, and doesn't react immediately. This deliberate absence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty produces respect. The psychological field is shaped by how he occupies space, measured posture, controlled gestures, silence that asks for no permission. Every detail reinforces the sense that he needs no one, and it is this independence that unsettles others. The power of this law lies in asymmetry. While 90% of men struggle to prove their worth, the strategist creates the impression that worth needs no demonstration. He turns presence into advantage, manages expectations, and keeps others one step behind. The perception he shapes places him at a level out of reach, where any attempt at confrontation feels inadequate. That is how he governs without having to look dominant. In the end, the strongest does not win. The one who controls what others believe they see, does. The invisible man moves through the world as if every external gesture were an internal command. He adapts, retreats, agrees, and tries to anticipate expectations in the hope of avoiding conflict. This behavior turns him into a figure without contours, dissolved into the environment and noticed only when he fails. His identity becomes so flexible that it loses substance. He exists merely as a reflection of the eyes around him. It is the perfect expression of silent weakness, presence without impact. The unshakable man is the opposite. He doesn't react. He absorbs. He observes first and decides later, keeping his center stable even when the environment tries to drag him into emotional games, trivial disputes, or ego battles. His posture conveys the sense that nothing reaches him directly, as if a psychological layer stood between him and the chaos around him. That distance generates respect, because authority is born from what remains firm while everything else wavers. The Machiavellian law turns this divide into destiny. When a man controls perception, he stops being a participant and becomes the ground on which the game unfolds. His presence shapes behavior, adjusts tone, and alters intentions. People become more cautious, more selective with their words, more aware of their own positioning. This is not intimidation. It is natural hierarchy emerging from inner command. The unshakable man forces the world to change its rhythm. The invisible man, however, collapses under any pressure. His emotional instability makes him predictable, vulnerable, and easily manipulated. Lacking a center, he leaves a void that others occupy effortlessly. He loses ground because he fails to defend his own psychological territory. Every impulsive reaction, every unnecessary explanation, every attempt to please reinforces his inferior position in a game he doesn't realize he is playing. Ascension begins when a man abandons reactivity and adopts strategic coldness. He becomes opaque, difficult to read, impossible to move. The world starts reacting to him instead of the other way around. And it is at this point that hierarchy becomes clear. The invisible follow the current. The unshakable set the direction. Controlling perception is not about manipulating emotions. It is about shaping the environment so it works in your favor before you take action. This control begins in silence. A man who speaks little forces others to fill the void with interpretations, and interpretation breeds caution. Silence doesn't create emotional distance, it creates hierarchy. It positions you above the frantic rhythm of those who need to be noticed to exist. Calculated absence turns the space into your territory. Unpredictability forms the second layer of this psychological field. When no one knows exactly what you think, want, or plan, they lose the ability to anticipate your moves. This opacity creates advantage because it reduces their capacity to resist you. People tend to respect what they cannot fully comprehend. Unlike the impulsive man who exposes his intentions in every gesture, the strategist moves with restraint, just enough to maintain narrative control without revealing his core. Calculated language strengthens this domain. Speaking less does not mean passivity, it means removing noise. Every word becomes a tool, not an outburst. Short, measured responses without justifications or excessive explanations create the impression that you hold more information than you express. This immediately shifts the social dynamic. Those who seek approval become verbose, while those who hold power conserve energy. The contrast exposes hierarchy without a single explicit claim. Reading the environment completes the terrain. A man who observes before acting identifies tensions, alliances, weaknesses, and hidden intentions. He notices who dominates and who reacts, who seeks validation and who seeks position. This refined perception allows him to adjust his presence with precision. Whether by reducing intensity or increasing firmness, he enters any environment in a way that tilts the axis of power toward himself. It is the invisible force that reorganizes others without direct confrontation. When all these layers combine, silence, unpredictability, verbal economy, and strategic reading, a man creates a psychological field where his presence becomes law. He doesn't need to compete, argue, or demand respect. He simply becomes inevitable. Being unreadable isn't about superficial mystery. It's about absolute control over access to your inner world. A man who exposes himself emotionally without calculation hands out valuable coordinates of his mind, allowing others to predict his limits, triggers, and weaknesses. In any power dynamic, predictability is a slow death. That is why strategists cultivate opacity, not because they fear being seen, but because they understand that excessive clarity is always a gift to the opponent. What is known can be manipulated. What is enigmatic must be respected. Emotional opacity does not mean artificial coldness, but mastery over what deserves to be revealed. The unreadable man feels, but he does not react. He observes, but he does not explain. He doesn't offer his emotions as public artifacts, nor does he provide long accounts that expose his internal structure. This restraint creates a presence that unsettles others, because it prevents them from establishing safe paths of approach. Without emotional maps, no one knows where to step, and that uncertainty elevates his position in the social hierarchy. Strategic ambiguity intensifies this effect. Small shifts in posture, answers that don't expose intention, calm pauses that break the other person's rhythm. Each detail becomes a psychological weapon. While the average man rushes to clarify, justify, and be understood, the strategist does the opposite. He maintains density. He knows that authority comes from what remains out of reach. To many, this looks like arrogance. To those who understand the game, it is intelligent protection of one's center. Narrative control is the final pillar of unreadability. The unreadable man decides when to appear, when to remain silent, when to respond, and when to ignore. He isn't dragged into conversations, conflicts, or the emotional demands of others. He sets the rhythm, and the one who sets the rhythm owns the terrain. This autonomy generates a rare kind of respect, not the kind forced by strength, but the kind born from the impossibility of interpreting someone with precision. The unknown always carries more weight than the known. In the end, remaining unreadable is holding the key to your internal empire. The man who denies access also denies manipulation, and the man who cannot be manipulated becomes inevitably a figure of power. Truly powerful men don't need to raise their voices to change an environment. They enter a room and, with no visible effort, shift the psychological axis of everyone around them. Their strength lies not in what they say, but in what they refuse to say. This economy of presence communicates dominance because it shows they have nothing to prove. When they speak little, every word carries weight. When they move little, every gesture becomes intention. The absence of need is what imposes immediate respect. In the workplace, this type of man doesn't compete for attention. He surveys the room, identifies tensions, and recognizes who is desperate for approval. While others try to impress, he manages his energy as if he is always at an advantage. He speaks only when his intervention changes the direction of the conversation, not when he simply wants to participate. This precision creates the impression that his opinion is always more considered, more calculated, and therefore more valuable. People begin to seek his input not because he demands influence, but because his posture suggests he already holds it. In personal relationships, the dynamic is similar. A powerful man does not chase emotional validation or rush to clarify misunderstandings. His calm unsettles people. He does not react to provocation, does not try to convince, and does not fight for space. This absence of social anxiety forces others to adjust their behavior. A woman becomes more selective with her words, a friend more careful, a rival more hesitant. The perception of silent strength reorganizes the field without him needing to assert authority. In broader social interactions, the contrast between acting to impress and acting to control the terrain becomes clear. While most people operate to be seen, the strategist operates to be remembered. He does not compete with noise. He simply sets the rhythm. His presence creates an atmosphere where people feel they cannot treat him as they treat everyone else. Hierarchy emerges naturally without physical force, aggression, or direct confrontation. This is applied power, invisible, undeniable, and deeply psychological. A man who controls the terrain never needs to display strength. He simply embodies it. Transformation does not begin when a man tries to change the world, but when he interrupts the automatic impulse to react to it. In that moment, his internal structure reorganizes itself. What was once instinct becomes choice. What was once anxiety becomes perception. What was once haste becomes precision. This shift is the foundation of ascent. The man stops operating through emotional survival and begins to operate through strategy. He understands that strength is not intensity, it is direction. When a man gains control over how he is perceived, something deeper changes. His relationship with his own shadow. He no longer fears his aggression, his silence, his coldness, or his ambition. Instead of rejecting these forces, he learns to command them. The shadow, once suppressed, becomes a tool of presence. Anger becomes focus. Pride becomes structure. Solitude becomes fortification. What the world once labeled as excess reveals itself as discipline, and that discipline makes him impenetrable. The need for validation fades almost without notice. A man who governs himself stops competing for recognition and starts occupying space naturally. His identity is no longer defined by external expectations but by the internal consistency he has built. He doesn't try to prove worth, he embodies it. This change is quiet yet devastating to any social dynamic because it removes from others the power to define his position. Dependence dies, and with it, weakness dies too. As this transformation matures, the man surpasses the 90% who still operate under impulses and illusions. His presence becomes an uncomfortable mirror. People feel the difference even if they can't describe it. He becomes inevitable not through imposition, but through stability. While others fluctuate, he remains. While others try to be heard, he is noticed. While others attempt to earn respect, he is approached with caution. A man who controls perception does not rise by chance. He rises because, by reorganizing himself, he reorganizes everything around him, and that is why he becomes untouchable. There is a moment when a man is confronted not by the world, but by his own consciousness. It is the instant in which he realizes that his entire life has been shaped by automatic reactions, primal desires, and inherited needs. This moment functions like a mirror, cold, silent, implacable. It doesn't reveal who you intend to be, but who you actually are when no one is watching. Most people look away, because facing their own weakness requires more courage than facing any external enemy. The mirror of the Machiavellian law does not ask what you want. It asks what you can endure. Can you endure silence? Can you endure being misunderstood? Can you endure not seeking approval? Can you endure walking without explaining your intentions? Powerful men do not carry strength by nature. They carry the discipline not to surrender to impulse. They understand that mastering perception begins with mastering themselves, and that any emotional gap becomes a weapon in someone else's hands. What you fail to control will be controlled by someone else. This mirror divides men into two groups: those who react and those who shape, those who beg for recognition, and those who move with calculated indifference, those who depend on others' approval, and those who use their own silence as a warning. The final question is not philosophical, it is strategic. Are you part of the mass that seeks validation, or part of the minority that creates the terrain? Your answer will not be spoken. It will be perceived in the way you occupy space from this moment forward. If you understand the law, you know that power is not an external conquest. It is internal architecture. It is the capacity to remain intact while the world tries to pull you into chaos. It is the constant decision not to surrender your center, even when yielding seems easier. From this point on, every gesture you make reveals which side of the hierarchy you truly belong to. If you understand right, I control the terrain. And remember, the law only works for those who govern themselves before attempting to govern any world.